Recording in progress.
Hello and a very warm welcome to yet another very interesting episode, our knowledge series from Ipga. And the theme that we are addressing today is very, very important. One, it's on the Rabi pulses sowing scenario. And the other, even more important, is about tour outlook for the season 2023-24. Well, the overall Rabi sowing area, as we all know, has been lagging behind. And within that, when you look at pulses, I have the dates of 8th of December, and we've seen pulses down by nearly 8%, 8.4% to be exact, as compared to last year. We have a whole battery of experts to be talking today, and we'll of course get a revision on those numbers in each pulses on where the scenario does look like right now. But we also do understand that we are coming in from a delayed sowing in some parts of the country. It was an erratic monsoon, the previous one. There have been various measures that the government of India has taken to ensure that there is availability and affordability. The impact of that, whether or not we've seen on sowing, and clear impact, of course, on trade is something that we will discuss as well. And then apart from that, there are policies from other countries. India is trying to tie up with many others to ensure that there is enough availability in the country. We will talk about a whole host of issues right now when it comes to Rabi. And of course, interestingly, as I said, Tuar, that is top of the mind there. So I invite Mr. Bimal Kothari, he's chairman Ipga, to start with his welcome note and set a context, and then of course we'll take it forward.
Thank you, Manisha ji. Good evening, good afternoon, good morning to all my friends of the global pulse trading industry in the different geographies of the world. On behalf of India Pulses and Grains Association, the apex body of the pulses trade and industry in India, I extend a warm welcome to all the participants, including dignitaries, members, patrons, and stakeholders, to this Ipga webinar, which will provide in-depth insights about the tuber crop production for 2023-24 and the sowing scenario, as well as the crop prospects for Rabi pulses in India. Friends, as Manisha ji mentioned, this year we witnessed delayed onset of monsoon and also very erratic monsoon, due to which the production of Kharif pulses were affected badly. As per the first advance estimate released by the Government of India, Ministry of Agriculture, tuber production for the year 2023-24 is expected to be around 33 lakh tons, which is approximately similar to the last year's production. Due to late onset of monsoon, there was delayed sowing, and the tuber crop production was expected to decline in comparison to the last year. However, due to the recent showers in the month of October and November, the yield for the tuber crop is expected to increase, and as the government estimate goes by, that it should be around 33 lakh tons. But still, we will be short by 1.2 million tons because our requirement is about 45 lakh tons. So it is pertinent that we need to import tuber from Myanmar and other East African countries in the next year, which to the tune of about 1.2 to 1.3 million tons. Because hardly there is any carryover is left, so we have to import a large quantity as much as possible to stabilize the price for tuor. We have witnessed climate change and global warming over the past few years, and and also the phenomenon like El Nino, which has really affected our crops. As you know, pulses are produced mainly in the rain-fed areas of our country, and it is a staple food for the large section of Indian population. Hence, to ensure the nutrition security of our country and availability of tuor and urad, IPGA has been closely interacting with government of Brazil, Argentina, and Australia to explore and facilitate the prospect of producing tuor and urad in those respective countries. I am confident that with the government of India's proactive involvement and support, we can facilitate the production of these pulses in substantial quantities in these countries, and to subsequently to augment the supply of these pulses to the Indian market in the near future. Friends, about the Rabi pulses sowing, as you are aware, the sowing of chana has been almost completed, and the sources indicate that the sowing acreage of chana has decreased by 10%, almost 10% compared to the last year. We had a large crop of about 12 to 13 million tons in last few years. However, it is estimated that chana crop size will decrease about 10 to 15% compared to the previous years. In light of the same, the Government of India recently issued a notification allowing duty-free import of yellow peas subject to registration under the import monitoring system up to 31st March 2024, as the yellow peas import will regulate the chana and other pulses prices in our country. Friends, as you know, we have taken various initiatives during this year, and we are also we are taking many more initiatives in the year 2024. You know, the World Food India 2023 Expo was a huge success, and IPGA Pavilion at the exhibition garnered an overwhelming response. We connected with stakeholders across the value chain to understand various issues pertinent to our trade and industry, and have been working to address the same. The Ministry of Food Processing and Industry will be organizing the third edition of World Food India in October 2024, and IPGA look forward to participating in a much bigger and grand way. Another important initiative what we are going to take in 2024 is the National Pulse Seminar, which we plan to host in the mid of the year, around August, around end of July and August in New Delhi. We shall endeavor to bring all the stakeholders of the pulses ecosystem together in the large numbers in this seminar. We are expecting a large gathering of about 1,500 to 3,000 participants. We shall keep you abreast of this program going forward. One of the major steps what IPGA has taken IPGA has been facilitating the modernization of antiquated dal mill and promoting a state-of-art infrastructure for pulses processing. We have submitted a proposal to the Department of Consumer Affairs, Government of India, regarding dal mill modernization, which is an initiative to increase efficiency, productivity, availability, and quality of dals, and we shall strongly pursue the same. IPGA will soon conduct a webinar to further promote awareness around modernization of dal mills, and we are also promoting the prospect of food park, which is IPGA Food Park. We believe that IPGA Food Park project will hold tremendous promise, and we intend to invite suggestions from our members, patrons, participants regarding this project. Before I conclude, I would like to thank our audience for their enthusiastic participation in IPGA Knowledge Series, webinars, and continuous engagement in the association's activities. Thank you so much. And now I would like to hand over to Manisha ji. Thank you, Manisha.
Thank you, Mr. Kothari. Before I let you go, I have a question for you. While you did list out a whole host of things that IPGA does intend to do in the next year, I have a question to ask you. I mean, I keep talking to you on various channels in Network 18 here, but I do want to know, there is this conversation yet again about something being done to increase availability of chana in the country. Is IPGA in conversation with the ministries on that? Because we did have Mr. Rohit Kumar Singh, and he did mention that he does take inputs from IPGA when they are making decisions when it comes to pulses.
Yeah, so as I mentioned in my address, that since government has, there is a, I mean, there is a possibility of 10% increase down this year, and the production is going to be hit, and production is going to be affected. So the government of India has taken the initiative to allow the import of yellow peas, and which is duty free, because the next year being the election year, so they want to curb the inflation. They want to say ensure that the prices of pulses remain stable. They do not go very high. So this step of importing yellow peas duty free, this is a major step to curb the prices and to ensure the availability of yellow peas, which they regard, and of course to some extent also it is a substitute of chana, because most of the yellow peas which is being imported into India is being used to make besan. So the cheaper available price of yellow peas definitely helps converting into the besan, and which can be a good substitute of chana. And moreover, we are also, of course, we are also hearing that the government of India is also looking towards removing the duty of chana from 66% to nil. But as let me tell you, the chana availability in other markets is only Australia, and from Australia the production is not very large. If you compare it to the Indian production, this year's production is estimated around 5 lakh tons. It is not a large quantity, but of course it will always help, particularly in this scenario when where our production is going to be to be down. So I think government of India taking all the measures to ensure that the supply is augmented and the prices remain stable.
Mr. Kothari, one final question before I let you go. So, do you think it always is a wise decision to cut import duties, especially at a time when you have harvest arriving in a couple of months, or do you think this is the right way to do to ensure that there is availability?
I think, Manisa ji, this is a very short-term decision. I mean, because you see, the import window has been allowed only for 3 months. It's not a long-term policy. If you really look at the long-term policy, my personal view is this: that you see, because we have given from IPGA, we have given several recommendations to the government that IPGA advocates a free trade policy, whether import or export, and to ensure that there should be, I mean, it should be a win-win situation for the farmers, for the consumers, for the government, and whether it's for the trade and industry. So we have recommended that of course, you allow the free import with the caveat that you impose certain amount of duty, so that the minimum landing cost of the imported goods is equivalent to minimum support price or little more than the minimum support price. So that, when the prices go very high, the import will trigger, and that will take care of the interest of the farmer, of the consumers. If the import is cheaper, then it will not the import will not come into the Indian market, because then we have the our production also, and then the cheaper the duty structure will be such that it will not be workable to import the goods into the Indian market. So they should look into the long-term policy, and they should ensure that, because they are taking all these knee-jerk decisions whenever required, 3 months, and this is very with this kind of decision, it is very difficult for the trade also to continue the business like this, because you do not know when they will impose the restriction and when they will allow the imports. But this was a very sudden decision. Of course, we were expecting this decision sometime 6 months back, when last year also, I mean, during the current year also, we had a lot of shortage of the pulses. So we are expecting this kind of decision, but it suddenly come at the time of sowing of the chana. But I can understand, looking at the election year, government has taken this initiative. And but as I said, this is a very short-term decision, and we can understand why this has been taken, because this is mostly it has been taken into the election as years has been taken into the consideration. So they want to stabilize the price, they want to curb the inflation. That is why they have taken this decision. But as an association, we will always advocate a free trade policy and a long-term policy.
Absolutely, and that really works in favor of everybody going forward. Mr. Kothari, thank you so much for being such a sport and taking call questions as always.
Thank you.
Let's move on to tour then, and joining us now is Mr. Ankush Jain. He's business head, Pulses, Olam Agri India. Ankush, I do understand that it's a difficult time being in Pulses, especially when you have to talk about tour, where we started the concerns coming in from, and then there was this spillover effect on various other pulses as well. But tour continues to be quite interesting because, as Mr. Kothari was saying, there is a bit of a problem area here. We are looking at a lower crop. The dependency on imports is likely on the higher side, which also is a bit concerning. Would love to hear all the numbers and your sense on this.
Sure. Hi, Manisha. Good evening, everyone. Can we have my presentation, please, on the screen? So, Manisha, I think you have rightly said, and I believe what Vimalji have said. So, it was a hot cake last year, and which has already started melting out, but have not lost the luster yet. This is what I can start with. And if I, let's say, talk about more on the numbers, if you can just move to the next slide, as the first slide. Yeah. So I think this year unsurprisingly, rather surprisingly, because we all were expecting that with the higher MSP and the higher market prices, the farmer should have eventually invested more time and more efforts in sowing pigeon peas this year. But surprisingly, finally, when we look at the overall numbers in terms of the acreage this year in pigeon peas in India, we saw that there is a decline of about 5%, largely on account of weather, which means that weather in itself showcase the importance of the climatic changes globally and in India as well. What we were initially talking about the El Nino year, we could see that impact in the during the sowing period of pigeon peas, wherein, as I said, because of the despite of high prices in pigeon peas, we have ended up with a lower acreages, which is about not much, but yet 5 to 6% of the lower acreages. Secondly, uh, it's not right to really compare with the last year only, but if we see the overall yield from the normal year it is less, but from the last year it definitely is better in some of the areas and definitely lesser in some of the areas, largely because of an extreme dry spell which we have seen between August till October end for almost 90 days, which was a crucial period for the flowering and the vegetative growth for pigeon peas like a crop. I think there we have seen a larger dry spell, which eventually impacted the overall height of the plant, which eventually didn't allow the plant to grow that extent. But fortunately, really God helped us, and in the month of November, we could see showering across the states in some of the areas it was really helpful, in some of the areas it was not to the extent it was expected, but yet it was indeed helpful for on overall numbers, which eventually helped us in seeing the overall yield better than the last year. Yet, as I said, like it's not a very good year to be in again as compared to the normal year. But as I think Vimalji have also mentioned in his presentation, that I think it was not as bad as it was expected during the first 2 or 3 quarters. So I think we may end up with the almost equivalent to the last year crop numbers this year, right? So overall, I think this has given a broader perspective to the entire stakeholders, including the government as well as the value chain participants, that weather is something which we have to consider significantly, and we may have to invest and study more in detail for the next 2 to 3 or 5 years, so that we prepare ourselves and safeguard ourselves for food supplies, because food is something which is extremely critical for a country like India, wherein we have to feed 1.5 billion people or 1.4 billion people, right? So if you can move to the next slide, please. And when we talk about the overall supplies, it is not limited to the what we are going to produce in India, but largely also gets impacted because of what we are getting supplies from the other countries or the supporting countries. So there, one, I would definitely like to congratulate the overall government that they have taken a lot of initiatives along with the agencies like an association like IPG and GPC, wherein we have eventually tried to cooperate and try to convince further international governments to eventually start sowing pigeon peas more in the other countries as well, right? But if you look at the overall import numbers within the 4 or 5 key East African countries as well as Myanmar, so we see that in 2020, wherein there were a lot of interventions in terms of the overall imports. So we saw about 500,000 ton of imports, which was largely from Mozambique and then Tanzania and then Myanmar. Then it moved up to 600K in 2021, and in 2022 last year we have seen somewhere about 965K, which was an historical import year in case of pigeon peas, wherein which also have given a confidence to all of the stakeholders. Yet yes, the countries like Mozambique and Myanmar, they can definitely grow more and more pigeon peas and try to eventually become a major supplier of these commodities, right? So in 2023, which is the current year, which is yet maybe another 15 days to end, but I think in this year, with the official data which we have till October end, the overall 700K cargo has already been arrived in India, and wherein Myanmar has been playing a vital role in terms of supplying the commodities, and they have eventually giving us a confidence that the overall acreage can be increased there. So out of the historical scope of about 200K to 225K, we have already imported about more than 270K by October end, which eventually further supported by in November and December. In November and December, specifically in the past 2 months, though we don't have any specific data, but last year we saw about 354K cargo arrived in specifically November, December, largely from East African countries. This year, with the ongoing issues and the disruptions in Mozambique specifically, which used to be the largest contributor of pigeon peas till last year, they have eventually may not be able to supply to the extent they can or they could so far. So in November and December, I believe the overall imports into India would not be more than 120 to 130K. So overall, we may end up this year by about 850 to 860 or 870K within this year. So which means that somewhere about zero point 0.9 to 0.95 million ton is looking like a cap at this point in time, unless Myanmar and Mozambique eventually pushes their growers more, and also the other countries start playing a major contributing role in terms of supplies of pigeon peas. One good news which we are hearing from Myanmar this year with the ongoing crop prospects, that this year they might end up giving us 325 to 350K, which will come in the 2024 calendar year. So looking at that support from Myanmar, plus I am sure that the government of India will definitely try to have a very healthy discussions with East African countries as well. Unlike this year, wherein we have seen some exports bans and then phyto-related issues out of Mozambique. So this next year, I think we will be better prepared, and we'll have a better relationship with them in terms of exchanging the cargoes, and potentially we'll have more smoother supplies out of Mozambique. So we are expecting in next year minimum 900K of export should be there, which can definitely go up to a million ton, but minimum 900K is what we are expecting the next year, and definitely a support from the government in solving these issues from Mozambique. And I think since Shamji is definitely going to talk about in detail about Myanmar, so I will not talk much in detail about Myanmar. But there are some political instability in Myanmar, so which is going to impact the overall supplies there for sure, and also not only supplies but also the currencies, which eventually have a price volatility, right? So this is something which through the IPGA forum, if let's say the stakeholders will get a ready and real-time updates, so which will be really helpful for the overall stakeholders to have an update on visibility on the same, so that they can take a wiser decisions on their trading and their trading calls, right? So can we move to the next, please? Without taking much of the time on specifically on tour, but I would rather like to talk about the overall S&D, which if we try to see from the last 2 or 3 years. So for any commodity, for any food commodity, 10 to 15% is a number which, as a carry forward or a carry out or a stock in hand at the end of the year, is quite crucial. So in 2021, we saw that there was a situation wherein government also had a carry forward with themselves along with the stakeholders, including the processors as well as the trading partners. They all had some stocks. But 2022 unfortunately had a not a, it was not a that great year. Then 2023, which is the current year, was extremely tight, and we have seen price rallies because of the tightness in the supplies. So there we still had some of the carry in, which was carry in from the last year. So overall we saw there was a decline in the consumption, and which actually happens when the prices goes beyond a certain limit. Then there is a part of our community which is an economic centric community, which eventually try to shift from a high value protein intake to a low value protein intake, which might give you a better economics in terms of protein intake. So we believe that almost if not more than 15 to 20% of the demand destruction must have happened, and largely contributed by the horeca segment, and also to the consumer segment directly, which is the household segment. And also there were a couple of initiatives which government have taken up during the past 1 year, and I think those were very rightful initiatives taken by the government to for a long term perspective. One, the substitution towards the other commodities like chana, chickpeas, right? And again, so we have also seen in the past the substitution happened, but the way the government of India has eventually put up the Bharat Dal as a concept and eventually tried to make the protein available at a cheaper price, that was well appreciated by the overall stakeholders. But I think that's not all. That's not limited. Secondly, the way they have put up the checks on the prices by imposing the stock limits, again they could manage or have a right check on the prices at a higher level, and they could also promote or encourage people to shift toward the other commodities like chickpeas or lentils. So specifically in terms of eastern India, where we have seen people moving away from pigeon peas to towards red lentil. Likewise in Chennai, wherein they have accepted the green lentil as a tender supplies and as a substitution towards pigeon peas. So after all the substitution, I think 15 to 20% of substitution is clearly seen. I we believe that 4.2 to 4.3 is something as a consumption which is yet to be there, and which is still very sticky consumption for pigeon peas. And the factor which is again very important, that we are a highly population dense country, right? And the CAGR for a population is about 1.4, 1.5. So every year we are growing, right? So the consumption is growing. So let's say even if we consider 1.5% of the growth from the consumption perspective, so overall 4.2 to 4.3 is a fair number which we estimate today as a consumption, as a consumption for the next year. So we would definitely need more than zero point 0.9 million ton of imports from the other countries. And I think as in the beginning, Mr. Vimal has also mentioned that 1.2 is something which we need, and with 1.1, anything beyond 1 million ton, maybe up to 1.2, will be suffice for the overall supply chain, so supply demand management. But it is going to be definitely going to be a tough year. But for the tough to manage the toughness, I think the government of India has again done something related to the yellow peas, wherein they have allowed the yellow peas imports to have a check on chickpeas prices and the lentil prices and the other commodities. So the way they have been able to manage the buffer stocks of chickpeas and lentils over the past few years. Lentils specifically in the past few months, they have bought more than 500,000 ton. I think they should definitely consider pigeon peas as a commodity, wherein they will have to create buffers either by having a G2G agreements with the international counterparts, or G2B or B2B in India, wherein the government will buy in INR. But I think from the farmers, unlike last year wherein they realized to buy at a market price bit late, I think this time they have to act proactive and create some of the buffers to manage the supply chain supply demand gap in a better way in this year. So as I said in the beginning of my presentation, that it was a hot cake which has already started melting down. So it has already come in, the prices have already relaxed a bit, and not a bit, eventually more than 20-25% from the highs. So I think government of India and overall value chain participants, not limited to the millers, but also to the farmers, also to the traders, it has come to a level wherein people can definitely try to consume this commodity again back into pigeon peas consumption, because if we try to convert the pigeon peas dal out of the raw material at 1995 rupees, so then it will come somewhere about, let's say, 140, 145 rupees of dal from the highs of 160, 65, which we have seen in the past. So it was already seen a dip of about 15-20%. So I think government and overall stakeholders should be wary of the fact that the production is almost at part of the last year. The supplies will be there from neighboring countries like Myanmar, from Africa, and definitely at higher levels there will be demand destructions. So so I think it we cannot lose some of the key variables, whether the supplies from the neighboring countries and the consumption at a higher level, and the production at the local level. So these are 3 or 4 variables which we have to closely monitor for the next 3 to 5 years, and we have to be ready for the next 3 to 5 years overall in the overall pulses basket. So these are my views, Manisha, regarding the PGNPs.
Ankush, you did mention about the substitution part of it, but what percentage of substitution did you say? I missed on that one. That sounds like
I
a
think
big number.
somewhere about 15 to 20% of the overall substitution must have happened,
Hmm.
and an additional of 1 to 2% must have gained because of the overall population growth which we are having in a country like India.
And we keep talking about self-sufficiency about a lot of pulses, but the import
Yes.
dependence is still on the higher side. Have you seen a pattern change on that at all, or is it going to be dependence as we keep making relationships with other countries? That's one. And the second is for Indian markets itself, with the kind of better standard of living and population increase as well. Are you guys working with a graph on what kind of demand growth are we seeing going forward for, let's say, next 5 to 8 years?
Yes, Maria. So there are a couple of points which you have just raised. I'll let's say take up one by one. So one is let's say regarding the overall stickiness towards the product, right? So which is related to the substitution. So what happens is there are these it's a product of families. So for example, when you talk about pea family, which has yellow peas and then chickpeas, so there can be a substitution between these two. So, but when it comes to the pigeon pea, so it's a very specific consumption pattern, which may not be easily substituted towards the other products. So in South India, it has a very specific consumption pattern, which is very hard to break. But in the northern India or in the other parts of India, wherein it is largely getting consumed as splits or in the horeca, there definitely has a scope to substitute. Where I believe in the last year, because of the price rally which we have seen, that demand destruction must have already happened. So, how we see it as a broad category. One category is something which is a very specific to the food patterns or the food habits, and second is a substitutable category. So, in the substitutable category, we have seen some of the substitution already happened. Second, when we talk about the let's say next 5 to 8 years of the demand growth perspective, so definitely we are moving at a very fast pace as a country, right? If you say the per capita income, the overall GDP is growing at a very fast pace, and our honorable Prime Minister is working on that in that regard, and which is really healthy for an economy like India, right? Which we are in. They are empowering people to have a disposable income, which by which they can choose the right protein, not only because of their capacity to pay, but also because of the intake which they are going to get. So we believe that in the next 3 to 5 years, potentially the payable capacity will be much higher than where we are sitting today, and it may not reach to the extent of what American countries might be having today, but much definitely better than where we are sitting today. So if we have already crossed a 4 trillion economy benchmark few days back. So I think we are heading towards 5 trillion economy very faster pace. So I think that will definitely push consumers to pay a better amount and choose the right product. Wherein the substitution largely because of the price will becoming less and lesser in the years forward. So in the next 5 to 8 years, we internally definitely work on those lines, and that is how a corporate eventually work for the next 1 or 2 decades. And we are very optimistic about India as a consumption market, and specifically for the commodities wherein they have a stickiness in the consumption habits.
I'll ask you a final question, and this one is on prices. While we've seen correction from the higher side, would you say a bottom is made? Winters clearly is slightly a lesser demand period for pulses, but the way we understand the sentiment, that seems to be keeping prices supported. But what's your range? What's your sense?
So I think we have seen one sort of movement, as you have rightly said, that we have already seen a movement. But so there are two factors. One, let's say the pipelines for the millers are a bit negligible at this point in time. People are not carrying much of the stocks, right? At the same time, farmers yet to come. Farmers yet to come and bring their produce, which is already delayed by 15 to 20 days, right? So I believe the market is yet to find a right price wherein the millers will start buying at a higher or a faster pace, and but at this price, or maybe uh, or maybe plus minus 5 rupees of kgs, farmer, I think they are very well remunerated, so they will definitely like to bring their cargoes and produce into the market. So my rather take would be that at these levels, or the farmer arrivals, the way the government have bought lentils when the arrivals were more. So the same way, I think they will have to act faster and try to buy when the farmer arrivals will be more, irrespective of the price. So I believe the market is yet to find a right price, which could be 2 to 3 rupees on the downside, or it could be 2 to 3 rupees on the upside. But that price, whatever the price will be, that price is not too far from the current prices, and the timing is not too far. I think the next 30 to 45 days will find a right price to for the market participants to jump in.
All right, we are willing to wait that much time.
Sure.
Ankit, thank you so much
Thank you.
for the
Thank you.
conversation. And as you mentioned, that Myanmar is going to be so important for us. Our next guest is going to absolutely talk about all of those details when it comes to Tur and Urad. Joining us now, and I invite Mr. Sham Narsaria,
Thank you.
who is President, Overseas Agro Traders Association, Myanmar. Mr. Narsaria, thank you so much for joining. And we would want to know on what's your sense when it comes to production, the kind of imports India would be looking at, and of course, the carry forward from last year, and your sense on prices. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Manisha, and good evening, everyone. First of all, Myanmar is a reliable supplier for India since last 4 decades. And consistently, Myanmar has been supplying to hold around 200 to 250,000 tons and black market around 600,000 tons, 6 lakh tons. But in 2017, because of some abrupt policy changes in India restricting urad and tur, it affected Myanmar farmers, Myanmar trade, and therefore production. So in 2021, as we can see in the chart, in 2021, the tur hold production was around 1 lakh tons. But because of, again, policy changes and considering urad and tur in OGL, now we can see in 2023, the production was 2,60,000 tons. And in 2024, we are expecting much higher, 3,50,000 tons for tur hold. For urad also in 2021, the production was 4 lakh tons. But in 2023, it was 7,50,000 tons. In 2024, we are expecting 15% jump, around 8,50,000 tons. What I mean to say is, Myanmar is always there for India, being the immediate neighbor. The shipment can be done very fast, can reach any India port in 4 days. So strategically, Myanmar is very important partner of Indian pulses for consumers. Within 4 days, we can reach in any Indian port, say Calcutta, Vizag, or Chennai. So it's almost like Chennai to Delhi. If a truck is loaded, reach in 3 days, and Myanmar to Indian port, it reach in 4 days. So it is almost like within India. Now, for the production of tur hold, first I say 3,50,000 we are expecting in 2024. This is a good jump. If we see in 2021, it was 1 lakh and almost 350%. This is the effort put by Ministry of Consumer Affairs, Indian Embassy in Myanmar, the Beans and Pulses Association in Myanmar, and our association, Overseas Agro Traders Association. We have provided timely information, right knowledge about the market, when to enter, what commodity to choose, how to make sowing, when to make sowing. This is one of the important factors. Second has been the price. As Mr. Ankush also said, right, last year the prices were very high. That also encouraged the farmers to choose tur hold as an option. Price was also a good factor. Third factor was weather. The weather has been very, very favorable for Myanmar this year. And I'm saying the number 3,50,000. This is the, I think, minimum number. It can go up to 375 also, or maybe 4 lakh also. Means we can see any surprise. But 3,50,000 is the minimum number. Coming to urad, again we see In 2023, the production was 7,50,000 tons. We can see minimum 8,50,000 tons in 2024. Reason being all the same: Indian government, their efforts, their follow-up, Indian embassy. They invited the Myanmar Beans and Pulses Association several times. They asked them if you need any help for the supply of quality seeds, any know-how, any technical know-how, any pesticides, fertilizers. They were really assisting the Myanmar associations to grow more seeds. Second reason being the weather. It almost rained up to November 15 in Myanmar, and the sowing of Black Mapte starts in first week of November. So the soil was very moist. The weather was very hot and humid. That helped Black Mapte to grow very well, and I expect minimum of 8,50,000 tons of Black Mapte will come. So what conclusion I take from here is Myanmar is a reliable partner. Only thing need to be taken care of is the consistent import policy by India. As Mr. Ankush said, to hold, still India have to import say 1 million tons, and almost 31/3 it depends on Myanmar. I, I, I suggest if India maintain a consistent policy for say next 5 years, make OGL for 5 years, I'm sure Myanmar production will rise to 5 lakh tons, which it used to be 10 to 15 years back. But because of the policy changes, it come down to 1 lakh ton in 2021. But again, because of the government support, government confidence, it is going up. Same in Black Mapte, from 4 lakh to 8 lakh 50,000. It's not easy. It's not a 1 year thing. It takes at least 3 to 4 to 5 years for the farmers to gain confidence, to grow again. So the important thing is policy, consistent policy by the Indian government, which they have maintained since last 2 years. But what I request through IPG and through your this webinar, the government should come with 5 year policy for all the countries, not only for Myanmar, for African countries, for Australian countries, for Canada, for Myanmar, everywhere. That okay, 5 year we are making OGL, and then I don't think there will be any shortage of any beans and pulses in India. That's it, Manisha.
Mr. Rosaria, I want to go back to the price part of it. So, while of course the expectation, as Ankush also mentioned, that we still are looking for a fair price here. It could be 2-3 rupees down or 2-3 rupees on the higher side. What's your sense? What kind of price are you looking at? What do you think is a fair price, or how soon can we find it? I get your point about a longer term policy. I mean, that is something almost every agriculture sector or area is looking at. I think we'll get that after the elections are done, perhaps. But until then, for the next 6-8 months, what's your sense?
For the next 6 months, my idea is the price is already very high, and especially for Black Mapte, I'm saying the I will talk in US dollar terms because for Indian rupee terms, we have experts. In US dollar terms, the current price of Black Mapte is say around $1,000 CNF for FAQ variety, small variety, and $1,100 for SQ variety. I think this is on a higher level, and I do feel since there is a carry forward of say around 100 to 150,000 tons of Black Mapte as of today, plus we see a bumper crop which is due on February first week. So we have Myanmar have to have almost 1 million, 9 lakh tons to 10 lakh tons to supply for the next 6 to 8 months. And I don't see any jump in the price. I personally feel the price will be 10% at least down from here for Black Mapte. For Turhol, Myanmar share is almost 1/3 of the Indian shortage. So it will not affect too much, but still Turhol price at this level, which is currently around in Indian rupee, it is say 90 to 93 rupees, and in US dollar, it is around $1,100. This is also on a higher level because the shortage is 1 million ton. Myanmar share is 1/3, and other African countries will also supply. So it all depends. If the price is say $700, okay, there will be a good demand. But in $1,100, I don't see a big demand coming from the consumers and millers. So I feel 10% down in even Turhol from here.
The other question Ankush already asked and basically shifted it towards you was the condition in Myanmar right now. How do you look at that? The currency is yet another thing that the street is watching out for.
Yes, this is an important point, Manisha. Myanmar currency has been very volatile over the last 6 months. In fact, I appeared in your channel. At the time, people were blaming that Myanmar is holding pulses. Actually, they were not holding. They did not have any other option because the currency is very volatile. They don't have any other option to buy, say gold or any movable, immovable properties. They were almost saturated. So they have only option to buy the pulses, rice, all these commodities. So they were buying and keeping it safe so that any currency fluctuation they can handle. But last 7 days there was a policy change by the Central Bank of Myanmar, which allowed exporters to sell their export proceeds 65% in the open market and 35% they have to sell to the government. Earlier it was 30-70, then it became 50-50, but now it is 65% traders can sell in the open market, which is a very healthy sign and positive move. And in the coming next 2-3 months, I see a lot of Myanmar traders will offer their goods in the Indian market. Earlier, only 2 or 3 big importers were able to offer the commodities, and all the big pulses traders were unable to sell their proceeds. They sell here locally, but now they will offer directly to India market, which is a very healthy sign, and there will be consistent and supply throughout the year. One more point I would like to point: we are talking about the India-Myanmar trade. Recently, with the efforts of Indian Embassy in Myanmar, Indian rupee trade, rupee Myanmar trade is taking place, which means Myanmar supplies can be sold in Indian rupee terms through the 2 or 3 intermediary bank like Punjab National Bank is working on it. So we can see a direct trade from Myanmar to India in terms of instead of US dollar to Indian rupee, which is again a very healthy and positive sign. And we in the coming days, the supplies from Myanmar will be very good and easy.
All of that is very, very positive to know. Thank you so much, Mr. Nasaria, for joining in. And let's move on from Tur and Urad. We've talked about the Indian and the Myanmar markets there. But another important thing, of course, is Chana, where the sowing numbers do not look so good. The production already is estimated on the lower side. So there are some concerns there. And in any case, we have been looking at a good demand coming in. Bharat Chana is another thing. Bharat Dal is another thing that India has seen do quite well. But let's get into the details of that. Manik Gupta is MD Viterra India. Manik, hi. Chana is your specialty. We've seen a lot of conversation, a lot of moves coming in from the government onto this one. But take us through the details, please.
Sure, Manisha, thank you. Can I have the presentation, please? Next slide. As Manisha, you mentioned that the sowing progress has been suboptimal for Chana. If you see the 2023 numbers, we are about 8.1 million hectares planted by the second week of December, which is about 900,000 hectares lower than last year and a million hectares lower than the year before. So we are clearly lagging by about 10% on year-on-year basis. When we look at some of the analog years where we've had similar lags in chana production, you see we've taken out 3 years, 2016, 18, and 19. We had similar acres that were planted till this time, which was roughly between 8 to 8.5 million hectares. Now, there are two ways to really look at. There are still a few weeks before we'll get the final numbers for chana, but we've done a bit of a scenario analysis at what the final number could be. Is there a possibility of a catch-up between now and final numbers being reported, or this is what it is? So the bottom table tells you a little bit about projected final numbers. If you take the 3 years average and we look at the average percentage sown till last week for the last 3 crop years, and we extrapolate that for this crop year as well, we come to a number of roughly 10.1 million hectares. If we use the last 7 years average, we are just shy of of 10 million, 9.94. And if we use the average of those three analog years, 16, 18, and 19, we're about 10 million. One of the interesting numbers that I'd like to point out is that in 2019, which is when the chana acreage was very similar to what it is this year, the final number and the current number was about 2.2 million hectares difference, which means that really in a best case scenario, you could look at 10.2, 10.3 million hectares of planting which will be about 7% lower than the year before. So in all likelihood, we are looking at this range of 7% to 10% lower year on year. Next slide, please. And this tells you a little bit of the sowing pace of the last several years. The dark red line is the current sowing pace, and the dotted line that carries forward is the projected pace, looking at the 7-year average. So you see, last year we were at 112, and this year we might end up close to 101 if we look at the 7-year pace. So this year the pace has been quite low, and as I mentioned in my earlier comment, that the only 1 year in the last 7 years was 2018-19 when the pace was similar. And we added 22 lakh hectares between now and end of the year. So the best case really is going to be 10.2, 10.3, but more likely 10.1. Next slide, please. This is a bit of, again, scenario analysis on the production. So this takes into account what the yields have been in the past. So the top table, if you see, is yields basis government estimates between 2016 2022, where 16 we know we had two back-to-back drought years where the yield was below 1,000 kilograms per hectare, and last year was pretty decent, not very good, but still just under 1,100 kilograms a hectare. And the year before, which was absolutely fantastic, was 1,178 kilograms per hectare. So again, at this stage, because there's still a good 3 months before the crop's actually made, we can really do some scenario planning and look at optimistic, realistic, and pessimistic scenarios. So what we've done is that if we look at an optimistic scenario where we get the best yield that we've got in the last 7 years, and we have an area of roughly 10.2, 10.3 million hectares, our final production estimate is 3% lower than the year before. And if we get slightly poor yields, that means if we get yields which are average of last 7 years, and a crop and an area of, let's say, 10.1 million hectares, you end up with a 14% lower crop. And on a more realistic basis, if you look at average yields of the last 3 years, which is in which 1 year was really good, which was 2021, you get a more sort of realistic scenario of 9% under. So in all scenarios, we think that the crop this year is going to be lower than last year. How much lower? We really need to see very closely the weather over the next 3 months. As we know that Rabi crops are susceptible to heat stress, let's say in Jan, Feb, March period. And we saw that happen last year where the crop was affected. On the right-hand side, I've just put in some of the major states for chana production and what really happened to monsoon and post-monsoon months. Gujarat during the monsoon was above average rainfall, 18% above average, which was June, July, August, September. And post-monsoon, we are trending towards normal. Karnataka, we all know, was really suffered during the monsoon period, and post-monsoon has been pretty dry as well. MP, we've had normal rainfall through the monsoon, and slightly, almost normal again post-monsoon. This is up to the 12th of December numbers. Maharashtra, again, broadly sort of in line. Rajasthan was a bit higher on both sides. But really, the devil is really in the detail. This gives you the numbers for the entire state. But when you do a district-wise profiling, you see that some of the chana-specific areas have received, especially in Karnataka and Maharashtra, have received much lower rainfall than you'd like them to receive from a crop perspective. So there are these sort of red flags or orange flags, at least at this stage, I would say, on the final crop numbers. Next slide, please. This is again a very high level. This is what we call the VHI, which is the Vegetative Health Index. Now, this is a combination of water availability, basically the green foliage in the crop and the heat stress in the crop over the last few years. And sorry for the color combination, I think it's getting a little mixed up, but this is data only from week 33 to week 46, which is basically the beginning of the planting window of chana and the last data that we have available for the VHI. So if you see the dark red line right in the middle of all the charts, that's the VHI for this year. And the other years are, the years in the past. So if you see really eyeballing it rather than looking at sort of the axes on the left, you see that the weather conditions this year are at par average. We are far from very bad weather, and we are also very far from the best weather we've had in the last several years. So I just wanted to show this to sort of have some sense on whether a realistic scenario that I mentioned earlier was more probable, or an optimistic or a pessimistic scenario. So I think the realistic scenario that I talked about from the VHI for the last 13 weeks, which is only 3 months, tells us that the crop's sort of going to be average yield that we've achieved over the last few years. So unless obviously the next 3 months, Jan, Feb, is going to be extremely important for us to watch out. If there is a major heat stress event, then the crop can go backwards. So we need to really watch the weather, how it plays out over the next 3 weeks. There's next slide, please. So that was really on the availability on the domestic crop, which was the subject of this webinar for me. But I just wanted to, I think, what happens if we have a 10% lower crop? Imports, and we have already talked a fair bit about yellow peas being allowed in this short window of up to March, and obviously the expectation is that 400,000 to 600,000 tons of yellow peas will probably come into this window, which will surely help alleviate the potential shortage of chickpeas that we will have into next year. But it's not just the shortage of chickpeas going into next year from the crop perspective, but if you look at the carry-in stocks, are also a little bit lower going into the next crop cycle. So, what are the other measures that the government can look at in terms of augmenting the supply of chickpeas in India? As Bimalji mentioned right in the beginning, that the only other country that we can buy chickpeas from is Australia, and the Australian production has been very average. As per ABARE, which is the Australian government agency, for 2023, which is the crop which is getting harvested now, the total crop is only 533,000 tons, with a carry-in of 260. Our estimate is that the crop's probably even lower, and the carry-in is also maybe a little bit lower, which means that the total exportable surplus out of Australia is not really going to be there to cater to the Indian market, even if the import duty was brought to zero. If you look at the charts on the right, it tells you the destination where where Australia has sold chana in the past few years, and even without India, they've managed to export 600 to 700,000 tons. So from a sentiment perspective, yes, if we were to open chickpeas import, I don't know what it does from a sentiment perspective, but in reality, not much chickpeas will come from Australia because they just don't have enough to spare for India this year. So all in all, the balance sheet going into next year seems a little bit tight, considering the crop being maybe 5 to 10% lower than last year, and the carry-in being lower. But at the same time, the yellow pea opening up does help that supply going into the next chana harvest. So we really need to watch very closely what the chana crop does before really we can see the direction in which prices move in the next season. So I think that's it. Short one from me, Manisha. This was on chana. Do you have any questions on chana before I move to lentils?
Well, absolutely. I do have questions for you. I want to understand on how have you seen various government measures actually work down? You've spoken about yellow peas one, but there have been so many other measures as well. One being, of course, the government's buffer stock also, and the Bharat Dal as an initiative. How have you read into that in sense of increasing availability as government has wanted to
I think the government measures, the most important one being able to buy 2.5 million tons, and the minimum support price of chana was extremely commendable, and I think it sends uh, the right message to the farmer that the government's going to buy a large part of the produce if the prices fall below the MSP. So that's positive. I think the government has time and again iterated that if they have stocks, if they have buffer stocks, they're able to control the prices. So I think interest of consumer is extremely important to the government, and whatever they've been doing, whether you look at the way the timing of the opening of the yellow peas, the you know the way they've uh, been selling chana dal in the market at the subsidized price, again to the advantage of the consumer. I think these are all very useful anti-inflationary measures from the government. And I think, like I mentioned, taking the duty off chickpeas or even kabuli will be another one, but that's probably going to be less impactful because world prices on those are already above where Indian prices are, even if the duty was brought to zero.
Manik, it's always interesting to know on what the industry feels on where the prices are headed.
That's a tough one. But like I said, we really need to still watch out for what the final crop number is. I think even though I say that the ending stocks are down, I think the government stocks are probably going to be down about 700,000 or 800,000 tons. I think they started their year off with roughly, or maybe a bit less, maybe 500,000 tons. I think they started the year off with 1.4, 1.5, and the expectation is that they will finish with, say, 1 million tons. Um, Prices, I mean, I think it depends on how much yellow peas, is yellow peas able to completely take care of the deficit in chana? Probably not, because the window is too short. The question is, will the government consider opening the yellow pea window for a longer period of time? Maybe not immediately, maybe in the fag end of the season. I don't know. So I think a lot of prices will really depend on that. But purely from an availability standpoint, I think the availability of chickpeas plus chana plus yellow peas is going to be lower than what it's been last year. So on prices, again, I think we saw a high of roughly 62, 63 rupees on chana this year, and the low of 48 rupees on chana. I think last year during the harvest window. My sense is that because if the crop's 10% lower, maybe we won't see those lows of 48. But on the highs, honestly, it's difficult for me to comment because it really depends on government policy as to at what price they want to sell. Because if they buy 2-3 million tons again, they're really going to be the holder of the largest stocks in the country.
One thing I have to give to this industry is that you've seen so many government measures and warnings and steps being taken that I do understand a lot of conversation or a lot of the lines that I hear from you has hopes and maybe, and if this happens, that seems to be a lot of language right now from the industry. But having said that, please take lentils away now. And we've seen prices decline here as well, almost at or below MSP for some of them.
Yeah. So, for all our participants, I don't have a presentation because I'm actually covering up for one of our panelists who couldn't make it. So I'm just going to have some notes in front of me that I can quickly talk on. Really not too much of an exciting story on lentils. We've seen roughly sowing pace, similar to earlier years. I think 16 lakh hectares have been sown. I think the expected number is between 18.5 to 19 lakh hectares, which is sort of similar to last year. Crop conditions in most growing areas are pretty good. In fact, some of the field surveys that we hear about are probably projecting to a slightly higher crop than last year. The farmers have received healthy prices. The MSP has been increased by 10%. So all the right signals have gone to the farmers on that they should be, planting more and This is one commodity that's been in short supply for a long time, and the government wanted self-sufficiency in this, which is very visible from the way MSP has been increased on lentils for the last few years. So purely looking at sowing and the crop, the sowing is probably going to be similar to last year. The yields, our expectation is maybe a little bit higher than last year. So we're maybe looking at 5 to 10% higher crop compared to last year. As per government estimates, the crop last year was about 1.55 million tons. Maybe we can look at 1.65 or something in that vicinity. The big change, the big thing to really talk about in lentils is the minimum support price. The minimum support price is 64 to 50, and current prices are trading well below that. So, but of course, there's still three and a half months for harvest. So we'll really need to see, how the prices move between now and the harvest window. India is right now disconnected from the world. The government bought almost 500,000 tons of lentils from the trade, and the estimate is that they're holding about 650,000 tons of lentils once the domestic campaign is over. So, like chana, chana, they were holding roughly, let's say if you said the crop is 10 million tons, they bought 2.5 million tons, so 25%. If you say right now the crop is 1.5 million tons, they are holding 600,000 tons, which is 40%. So from a price perspective, from a supply perspective, government again next year is going to be extremely important participant in the lentils market, something that's been missing for in previous years. Last year, we heard they bought about 150,000 tons of lentils from the farmer. This year, they probably buy more, considering how much lower the current price is compared to the new crop MSP. In terms of, I want to just add one thing on substitution. When we saw yellow pea prices, pigeon pea prices being close to sort of 100 rupees a kilo, we did at least hear a lot about substitution. And when we look at total demand of lentils and total import of lentils, total projected supply, and out of which how much the government bought, we think that the domestic consumption of lentils was up between 250 to 300,000 tons. And that sort of also ties in with the total demand destruction that you see in pigeon peas as per Ankush's presentation. If the situation stays tight again, going into next year on pigeon peas, maybe not as tight as last year, we may see some additional demand going to lentils. So the question is that from an import standpoint, 2023 had one of the largest import campaigns for lentils. Roughly 1.5 million tons of lentils was imported into the country. Next year, depending on what stocks government wants to carry into the following year, and how much the crop is higher, we expect maybe 5 to 10%. The lentil import number will probably be lower going into next year. So yeah, there's not much, honestly, for me to add on lentils, except that current prices are below the new crop MSP. Government's holding 650,000 tons, and the current crops looking in good shape. So next year's imports probably going to be lower than our current imports this year.
So this is perhaps going to be one area where we don't really have to have too many concerns or measures coming in from the government. Manik, thank you so much. You were saying something?
No, I said doesn't look like we're going to have any concern on lentils.
Okay, so one area where we're safe there. Thank you so much, Manik. Let's get on to urad then, and the kind of production and consumption and supplies that we're looking at in this sense. And for that, Mr. B. Krishnamurthy, MD 4P International, is now with us. Mr. Krishnamurthy, hi, good to have you. Please take it away.
Thank you so much. Very good to see all of you here. I will start my presentation. Chairman Bimal Kothari, Manisha ji, my distinguished speakers and co-panelists and colleagues from industry. A very good afternoon to all of you. At the outset, let me thank IPGA for this opportunity to give my views on today's webinar on Rabi pulses sowing scenario and Tour Outlook 2023-24 as part of IPGA knowledge series. I'm here to focus and give my perspective on Desi urad point of view. But before that, let me give you a brief idea about the uniqueness of urad to the uninitiated. And I always thought that these extraordinary qualities of urad should be always mentioned in every webinar where I have been invited to speak on. So to those who watch my presentations on all webinars, they may look repetitive, but these are worth repeating. The first and the foremost is that it has no substitute. Unlike other pulses where they have alternatives, urad has no alternative. For example, if tur is in short supply, consumers can opt for lentils or green peas or yellow peas from Canada or USA or of Indian origin. Basically, this means they can opt for other pulses having similar taste. But urad has no alternative because this pulse is bitter in taste, mildly bitter in taste. The second special feature is that it is as of now grown in only 2 countries in the world, namely India and Myanmar. Some sincere attempts are now being made to grow this pulse in Brazil. And one has to wait and see if this is commercially feasible and if it can be grown successfully on a mass scale. Some other countries too tried in the past to grow this pulse on a commercial scale, but somehow they were not successful. Let's hope Brazil will be successful. Government of India too is giving more emphasis now on growing urad in Brazil. The third extraordinary quality of this pulse is that it is very good for health, both external as well as internal, because its batter is very good for skin when used externally, and similarly when consumed as food is very good for internal health, as it is gluten-free and offers an excellent dietary fiber, vitamin B, copper, zinc, etc., and is a very safe protein source. In fact, I would say that with so many benefits, its use must be made mandatory for every person on a daily basis. And last but not the least, urad, when converted into batter, the quantity becomes multifold, and there is no other pulse which offers this unique advantage. That makes the urad a very competitive, cost-competitive pulse to a consumer. This year, 2023, Rabi urad crop supplies went well. Kharif crop too sowing was normal and good, but the untimely huge rains affected the crop size and quality. This resulted in rise of prices for a brief period of about 2 to 3 months, peaking with festival demand in October. And thereafter, prices started correcting, and the correction so far has been quite good and is still continuing. Coming to the Rabi crop of 2024, as per the data available with the National Food Security Mission, Rabi urad has been sown as on 8th December on a total area of 340,000 hectares compared to 382,000 hectares last year, recording a marginal decline of about 11%. Sowing is in progress and is not over it. My observations on Rabi crop sowing and price outlook are as follows. Telangana new crop urad harvesting has started, and it will be in full swing in the next 2 to 3 weeks. And the expectation is that quantity will be more or less same as that of last year. And the sowing happened on 78,000 hectares, which is almost the same as last year. Tamil Nadu new crop harvesting will start around January 15 and will be available in full swing soon thereafter. But here, some heavy rains are forecasted during the 3rd week of December, and we need to wait and watch if these rains will affect the standing crop. If the crop escapes these forecasted rains, then I think supply will be good. Tamil Nadu will harvest urad crop on 210,000 hectares, which is more or less same as that of the last year. Andhra main crop sowing was over, but the recent heavy cyclonic rains have washed away a major portion of sown area. This whole area is under resowing, and therefore the main Andhra Rabi crop will be harvested around 15th March, which means a little delay of about 15 days, and one hopes that there won't be any more untimely rains. Right now, Andhra is supplying a small size crop, and Telangana crop will soon supplement the supplies. Andhra, some areas where urad is normally grown on unirrigated lands, this time around such sowing is reported to be quite low. This year, urad rates have offered Indian farmers a very lucrative price, compelling them to sow more. And we are experiencing supplies from places like Bengal, where the supply was not so high earlier. Considering all expected supplies from Tamil Nadu, Andhra, and Telangana during December to February, and the main Rabi crop from Andhra from March onwards, I expect supplies will be continuous and price behavior therefore will be stable to soft. Myanmar main crop, which will be harvested in February and March 2024, next year, is expected to be higher than last year, as more area has been brought under Orad, which was earlier sown with mung. So supplies from Myanmar next year should be higher, impacting prices. Myanmar special quality prices, which were ruling around 71 in the month of January 2023 this year, went up to as high as 103, 104 levels towards the end of October, have started softening and are now quoting at 93 levels, all Chennai port delivery rates. This means nearly 1/3 of the price differential has already been given up, and we can expect further softening going forward, barring occasional hiccups due to festival demand, like probably we'll experience one good demand in the Pongal time of January. This year, untimely huge rains have impacted crops as they have been for the last 3 years. If it were not for these rains, harvested quantities of good quality crop would have been much higher. The crop size would have been much higher, and the quality would have also been much better. So there was no dearth in sowing, only that yields have been continuously impacted negatively, resulting in lower crop sizes. At this moment, Myanmar is not holding more than 75 to 80,000 tons of Orad, coupled with another 30 to 40,000 tons from a small December crop. India has imported nearly 6 lakh tons during January to November, meaning almost 55,000 tons per month. At this rate, Myanmar has stocks for another 2 months only. One hopes there won't be any climatic issues there at the time of harvest in February or March, and supplies will be smooth. Otherwise, supplies could be an issue, and in which scenario prices could firm up quite a bit. I want to make a small observation here, and that is, unlike Tor, which is very much part of a main meal of every citizen in this country, Orad is not so important for daily life. It is mainly used as a snack, chiefly in South India, although it is now quite popular across the country and some parts of the world. It's not a part of the main meal. So it's clubbed with mung also. When you give category-wise data, one might see that when the data is made available, sometimes Orad and mung is clubbed together, unlike Tor. So I think Orad should be treated just like mung, unlike Tor. This is just an observation. Prices are expected to be soft, and I think this is the time to build buffer stocks. I now conclude with my view that prices will continue to correct and availability will be smooth, and barring unforeseen climatic issues, there should be just no worry about prices and availability of cargoes. I again thank IPGA for this opportunity and would take questions and try my best to answer. Thank you.
Mr. Krishnamurthy, the question that I have is, when you said that you're looking at stable to soft prices, yield of course is a concern, but when it comes to sowing and crop, you don't see a big aberration coming in there. In light of all of this, with the kind of government measures that we've seen in Tuar and then spilling on to Urad as well, how would you see that?
My view is, Tuar and Urad should not be clubbed together, number one. And number two, this year farmers have got a very good price, and they have been, it's compelling for them to go for Orad than, for other crops. I think there should be no worry at all about availability or prices going forward, except I repeat always here that climatic issues, if there are no climatic issues in Myanmar, mind you, if Myanmar is going to have any climatic issue in the month of February, and I think that would be a serious issue, because Myanmar, with their 6 lakh tons of exports to India, they are bridging a huge gap in India. For example, when Myanmar exports Orad, their quality is beautiful. Their quality is very good quality. They clean, very good cleaning and all that. You see, I can put it like this, 10 kilo of, let me say 1 kilo of Myanmar Orad is equal to 1.2 kilo of Desi Orad. Here, desi water quality is not so good. See, when quantities are imported from Myanmar into this country, they are subjected to a lot of checks and balances. Like, for example, it has to be passed by PQ, it has to be passed by FSSI, etc., etc. Here, when I go to local APMC yard, what I get is very sometimes very inferior quality cargoes. You see, FSSI should be made applicable equally, whether it is imported cargoes or in desi cargoes, which is unfortunately not happening. I presume it is because of infrastructural issues, because there are so many thousands of mandis in the country, and probably that matter has to be sorted out. But I think I think we can rest assured. I think there is not going to be huge price volatility. Prices will be soft because the supplies are going to be good. And as I'm repeating again, barring unforeseen climatic issues, things should be pretty good for world. From consumer point of view, prices will be soft.
That's heartening to know, Mr. Krishnamurthy. Thank you so much for joining. And I can see Mr. Rajas Sarda already ready for what he needs to do next. Over to you.
Sorry. On behalf of IPG, I would like to thank all the esteemed panelists for the enlightening session into the nitty-gritties of the Rabi crop, which will soon start to be harvested, starting with the pigeon peas and following up with the rest of the pulses. Now, pulses trade for the last 1 year has been really tricky and very volatile in the current year, because almost all the factors have influenced the pulses business. There has been a poor monsoon, followed by winter rains, then policy intervention by the government. So all these possible interventions from various factors into the industry make the decision-making process even more difficult for all the millers and traders. I hope that today's session has actually helped the members of the industry, including the millers and traders, take judicious decision for the coming Rabi season. And once again, thank you very much on behalf of IPGA. And thank you all the esteemed panelists, and thank you all the participants who have been here listening patiently to all the presentations.
Hey, thank you.